Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Repeat Ron, and today we're going to be going over all of the gunner overclocks as of right now, and we'll be ranking them in our tier list. Let me start off by saying that this is purely my own opinion, so if you have a different opinion, awesome, cool. Love to hear it down in the comments below, as well as tell me where you'd put some of these overclocks, maybe in different categories than I would. I'm going to be running through the categories. Let me do that real quick. S tier is anything that's broken, crazy, insane, overtuned. A tier, anything that's great, just solid overclocked all the way around. B tier is anything that's better than average. You'll see a lot of clean overclocks here. C tier is kind of the average overclocks or very specialized overclocks, more over-specialized overclocks that are just, they're kind of hard to build around, or they do one specific job very effectively, but you know, they're just a little bit odd. And then D tier is the overclocks that I kind of wish were better. So let's begin. First up, we're going to be talking about the minigun. And the minigun's first overclock is a little more oomph. Little more oomph gives you slightly more damage and slightly faster spin up. Actually, quite a bit faster spin up, especially if you take the other spin up one, then you're spinning up pretty much immediately. A little more oomph is really good. It's one of the best overclocks for the minigun. I'm definitely going to put this one up into A tier. It's a solid all-around overclock. I don't think it gives the minigun too much. I don't think it makes the minigun overpowered, but it is just like such a nice quality of life overclock that I feel like it belongs up in A tier. Our other clean overclock for the minigun is the thin drum walls. This increases our cooling rate by a little bit, and it increases the maximum amount of ammo we can have by 300 ammo. That's pretty good. This one's going to go up into B tier. It's not as crazy as a little more oomph. I like that one. I like the feel of that one a little bit more, but thin drum walls, it's all around good. I like it. For balanced overclocks, we have Burning Hell next, which Burning Hell is a very interesting one. This one makes it so you start dealing fire damage to all enemies around you, but your gun does heat up faster than normal. And that's not a huge deal though. This completely destroys hordes of grunts, and it really destroys anything of like swarmers. So, or jellyfish too, which is great. It pairs really well with the volatile bullets from the revolver. It can also pair well with a team that's running all fire weapons, so if you got a drill or the flamethrower, works pretty well. I don't know where I'd put Burning Hell, though. You can deal with crowds really easily with it, and the minigun also does really well against single targets, so it is very versatile. But I'm not sure if it's as strong as some of the other overclocks we got for it. I think I'd put it up into A tier, but it's going to be on the low end of A tier, because it is a little bit more specialized, but I feel like it's still a pretty good buff for the minigun, especially if you're running it with the volatile bullets, which are even more specialized, but pair with it really well. Our next overclock is the compact feed mechanism. This one lowers your rate of fire by a little bit. It's not too noticeable with the minigun, but it is there. But you get 800 more bullets, so you get a lot more bullets with the minigun. Good. I don't think it's as good as a little more oomph. I think I'd put it slightly above thin drum walls. I don't think I'd put it into A tier. I think it's B tier. It's solid. I like it. Just if you want to run more ammo, awesome. Especially if you want to run this with like burst pistol full ammo. It takes you a very long time to run out of ammo if you're running that build. Up next is exhaust vectoring. Exhaust vectoring gives you 2 more damage, which is pretty big for the minigun, but it increases your base spread by 150%. If you take the tier 1 that gives you lower base spread, it's really not that bad. I did once say that this overclock was pretty bad because of the spread, but if you take that one, it's pretty manageable. Even if you take the rate of fire one, it's still not that bad, at least at medium range. At longer ranges, yeah, the minigun's not going to do well then. It's perfectly fine, and this is just an all-around strong overclock. I'd put it up into A tier. I don't know which of these I like better. I think I like a little more oomph, a little bit more, even though it gives you slightly less damage. That spin up on it is just so nice to have. Then for our unstable overclocks, our first one is Bullet Hell, which Bullet Hell is a very interesting overclock, and it's one of the funnest overclocks in the game, but it doesn't always work the best. It's inconsistent. It increases your base spread by 500%. So your base spread is much, much more than it normally would be. You also lower your damage by 3, so you're doing quite a bit less damage per shot. But your bullets always have a 75% chance when they impact an enemy or when they impact terrain to ricochet into another enemy. within 6 meters of where the bullet hit. That is pretty cool. It's pretty fun when this overclock is working for you. It's not so much fun when this overclock is not working for you, and I wouldn't recommend taking this one on every mission because it can let you down at times, and it is highly specialized. I'm going to put this one into C tier, even though in terms of fun, it's probably S tier because it is just, especially if you're running like magic bullets with this and you're just going a completely random build, hoping to see where your bullets hit. It's great if you don't want to aim at all. Or if you do the strategy of like sort of drilling a hole into a wall or something and just firing the minigun down it, because it's very likely that all your bullets are going to hit anything coming into the hull. Then it works pretty well. But outside of that, if you're going to run and gun with it like you do with the other minigun builds, it's not way great, I would say. Then our last minigun overclock is Leadstorm. Leadstorm gives you 4 more damage, which is a huge buff to the minigun. It lowers your stun chance though. So you no longer have a 20% chance to stun with each bullet, you have a 5% chance. Your stun duration is also no longer 1 second, it's half a second. The other thing is that you can no longer move when you're shooting the minigun. Now you can avoid this, especially if you're in low gravity, then this overclock's pretty good. You can avoid this in escort missions because you just stand on Doretta and she'll take you wherever you want to go, so you don't need to move then. It's also potentially good on zip lines because you can still use that. You can still jump up and down too when using this. So there are some options to using this, but it does take some setup. It's really good on like escort missions. It can be pretty good on salvage missions too, because where you're just holding the area there. And of course you have your shield too. So it is more specialized, and I wouldn't put it as high as exhaust vectoring or a little more oomph. I think I did before, but it's not as good as those two. I still like being able to move with the minigun. That is very useful to actually do. And this does lock you down. I found myself not taking Leadstorm all that much anymore. It's still a decent overclock, and I'd probably put it high up into B tier. But I don't think it's as strong as these other 3 in general. Could be stronger than Burning Hell. Depends on your setup. Burning Hell is a little bit more, well, they're both specialized, but I think Burning Hell's better overall because you can kill crowds with it a bit quicker. Leadstorm's good against single targets though. So I think this is where I'd put all the miniguns. As you can see, minigun starts out pretty solid. Very good overclocks overall. The only one that kind of stands out to me is Bullet Hell, but some people really love it, and I understand why. It is really fun to use. Alright, moving on to our next weapon. We have the Autocannon, and our first one is Composite Drums. Composite Drums gives you 100 more maximum ammo and cuts off half a second from your reload. The half second from your reload doesn't really matter. You're probably not going to bother reloading the Autocannon ever because you're probably just going to run Born Ready with it and switch to your revolver or your burst pistol until it's reloaded and then switch back. The extra ammo is really nice though, especially since you can go with the tier 1 for extra ammo and have 770 ammo total. Because you need that much ammo apparently. This one's good. I like it. I think it's all around real solid. If you find yourself burning through ammo quickly, try this one out. I'm going to put this to the high end of B tier. Then we have Splintering Shells, which is our other clean overclock. This gives us 1 more area damage and increases our area effect radius by 0.3 meters. This one's also pretty good. I like this one. I know a lot of people really love running this one. It does just a straight buff to the autocannon. I think I'd put it into A tier. Maybe above Burning Hell. It is more useful overall than Burning Hell. Maybe not as high as the damaging ones for the minigun. I think I'd put it there. Next up, we have Carpet Bomber, which increases your area damage by 3. It lowers your direct damage by 7, but it also increases your area effect radius by 0.6. So you go up to 2 meters of effective radius with Carpet Bomber. This one's really good. This one is probably the best for dealing with almost every situation for the autocannon, because it works incredibly well against hordes, and it works decently well against single big targets like Praetorians, Dreadnought, stuff like that. It is pretty solid all the way around. I honestly don't know where I'd put this one, though, anymore. Because I used to put it in S tier, but I found myself just not taking Carpet Bomber all that much. It's good for just about everything, though. I know last time I put this into S tier. I think this time I'm going to put it at the very high end to A tier. It's great for hordes. It's great for taking out plenty of stuff. I don't think it's as broken as I thought it was. And, since I'm putting this up into A tier, I think this one actually goes higher. Because I found myself taking Splintering Shells more than Carpet Bomber, where Carpet Bomber gives you more area damage, but it does mess with your overall just direct damage. Because with Carpet Bomber, you're doing 12 and 7. So you're dealing, 7 and 12. So you're dealing 19 damage on each hit, although this is splashing and hitting more enemies slightly. This one doesn't give you as much explosion radius, but it doesn't mess with that damage, so you're always doing 24 damage. Or at least 14 and 10. So I do think Splintering Shells is actually better. But even so, I don't know. These are all kind of on par right now. So moving on to our next overclock, we have Combat Mobility. Combat Mobility decreases your base spread with the gun, which is good. It also increases the rate of fire at which you start ramping up your rate of fire. Also good. And it increases your movement speed from 50% movement speed up to 85% movement speed. This is actually really nice to be running around with the autocannon then. You don't feel like you're weighing yourself down as much. However, this does cut your magazine in half. Not way great. I wish it didn't do that. Everything else is pretty good. But if it didn't do that, then it probably wouldn't be a balanced one and it would just be real strong. This one, high up into B tier. If it didn't chop your magazine apart, it would probably be like S tier because this thing does feel really good to be using. Next one we got is Big Bertha. This one increases your direct damage, reduces your ammo, reduces your magazine, reduces your top rate of fire, but it also reduces your spread. That's a good thing. This one is the highest damaging overclock that you can have for the autocannon usually, at least against single targets it is. Against multiple targets, Carpet Bomber or the Splintering Shells would be better. This one is the highest amount of single target damage that you can have, which does make it really good for Dreadnoughts. It makes it good for Praetorians. It makes it pretty good on most missions. I think I'd put this one up into A tier because I still don't see myself taking it as often as these two. It's good. I like it a lot, but I don't think it's as strong as these two for most missions. It's better on elimination missions. And it can be better on even escort missions where I want to use it for knocking down boulders. And then our last overclock here is Neurotoxin Payload, which this one lowers your base damage by 2, lowers your area damage by 5, increases your area effect radius as much as Carpet Bomber up to 2 meters, and it gives you the Neurotoxin Payload, which makes it so every shot has a 50% chance to inflict the Neurotoxin damage, which does damage over time, at 12 poison damage a second for 10 seconds, and slowing all enemies down. This also stops any enemy from regenning health if you have regenerative bugs, same way fire does. This one is really strong. This one is probably the one that I would put into S tier out of all the autocannon ones. These other ones are also really strong, like any of these ones in A tier, but I think this one's the strongest. Even though you're lowering your damage and lowering your area damage, you can still splash poison to multiple enemies, inflicting poison to them, slowing them down, and dealing damage over time. This is probably the best overclock for dealing with hordes. It's very good at slowing any big things down too. It doesn't kill them incredibly quick though. The Big Bertha would definitely do better. Even the Splintering Shells would also do better than this. I think even Carpet Bomber does better than this. So you could argue that they're more versatile, but this one is so specialized for slowing and killing crowds. The majority of the time what you're going to be fighting is crowds. And this is one of the best things for killing crowds. Alright, then moving on to the Hurricane. So first up, we got Manual Guidance Cutoff. This one I talked about in my other one. I think it's kind of a dumb overclock. I don't really like it. It's D tier. This one makes it so once you release the trigger from firing your missiles, then they're no longer guided. So they just fly straight, which is not really that great. You do get faster velocity on them, but that's about it. And I don't really care for that. I'd rather not have this. This feels like it should have something else on top of it if it's going to do that, rather than just the faster velocity. I don't feel like this is a great compromise for the overclock. Then we have Fragmentation Missiles. This gives you more area damage and a larger explosion radius. This one's decent. I like this one. I'd put it into B tier. It's all around pretty good for the gun. It lets you kill things a little bit quicker than you normally would and have a little bit of explosion radius so you can kill crowds a little bit easier. Great. Then we've got the Overtuned Feeding Mechanism. This one's A tier. This one's good. Probably there. This one just increases your rate of fire and increases your projectile speed. Two things that really make the Hurricane feel even better. Then we've got the Plasma Burster Missile. This one halves your ammo, halves your damage, halves your explosion radius. It halves both your damages, actually. But it increases your velocity, it decreases your velocity, increases your turning rate, and now your rounds can punch through multiple enemies and then explode multiple times. You can explode up to 6 times, I think, or at least hit an enemy 6 times with the same projectile, which is pretty good. You can stack a lot of damage on this. However, this one does have has a few problems with it. One is that it doesn't always work if you're not hosting. If you're hosting the game, then it works most of the time. If you're not hosting, though, it's kind of a crapshoot as to if it wants to work or not. So your missiles might just disappear. Same goes with the next one we're going to talk about, the mine layer. So it isn't as good then. It also is kind of bugged at the moment, where it does way more damage than it should to like the rocks on the escort mission. Not sure why that is, but it does do that. So hopefully that gets fixed. This one, when it works and everything, and assuming it does get fixed, A tier, lower end of A tier because it is more specialized. Next, we got Mine Layer. Mine Layer lets you set down your missiles as mines. You no longer can turn the missiles, though, so guidance is completely cut off, but you can put your mines down, which scale off of your area damage and explode to deal even more area damage. They can only last for 15 seconds, though, so you can't set them up like proximity mines. They're more like the cryo minelets that Scout has. These ones can be good, but again, sometimes they can just disappear, similar to the plasma missiles, if you're not hosting. If you are hosting, it's not that big of an issue. Even so, I feel like this one's still a bit more specialized than the plasma burster missile is. I'd put it into B tier. Probably on the lowest end of B tier. You could argue it into C tier, though. It feels a little bit weird. I don't think it feels as good as some of these other overclocks do. Then we have the Jet Fuel Homebrew. This one increases your direct damage by a lot. It increases your velocity, but you lose out on ammo, area damage, and area effect radius. This one's really good, though. This one might be the highest amount of damage to a single target that you can do out of any of Gunner's weapons. Probably not any of their weapons, because I think Elephant Rounds with the revolver still might beat this one out. But it does more damage to single targets than like the Big Bertha can or that Leadstorm can. I'd put this one up into A tier. I think it's pretty good overall. And then we've got Salvo Module. This one lets you charge up however many rockets you want to shoot, up to 9 of them. For each rocket that you have charged up, they get bonus movement speed, as well as they do more damage for each rocket also charged up. This is great for crowds. This is great for big enemies. You can shoot it pretty much like a shotgun. This does not mess with your turning either, but you do have to fire your rockets one at a time if you still want to control them with your guidance system. So you could still have multiple rockets up, but they're not going to be... you're not going to be able to shoot them out as quick as with pretty much any other overclock having it. Salvo Module, though, is still real solid. I like it. I'd put it up into A tier. Then we move on to our secondaries, where our first one is the Revolver, and our first and only clean overclock we have for it is Chain Hint. This makes it so any shot, when you hit a weak spot, has a 75% chance to ricochet off of that, and then hit an enemy within 5 meters of it. This is the same as the Sabatas. The Revolver is more damaging than the Sabata, so hitting something else with the Revolver shot is pretty nice. I still don't think this thing's incredible, though, and I don't take it all that often. It is better than nothing, though, but I think I'm going to put it into the high end of C tier. It's okay. Next up, we have the Homebrew Powder, which Homebrew Powder on the Revolver is pretty decent, I would say, because this one is scaled higher than the Homebrew Powder for the Scout's Assault Rifle and for the Sabata, where that is 80% to 140%. This one scales your damage randomly between 75% and double damage. So that's pretty nice. That actually lets you high roll fairly often. You can low roll, but even so with the Revolver, if you low roll, it's not a huge deal. This does make it so you can potentially one-shot body shot grunts, which is good. You'll one-shot headshot grunts regardless, I think. Maybe not. Maybe if you really low roll, you won't. But if you go with any of the damage ones, then that completely negates this. This one is better on the Revolver. It's still not one of my favorites, though. I still don't particularly care for the randomized damage when I could take some of the other ones. But this is the best of the Homebrew Powder ones, and I'd probably put it up into B tier, somewhere in the middle of B tier. I think that it's pretty decent. Next up, we have Volatile Bullets. Volatile Bullets is really good, but you do need to build for it. If you're not building for it and your team isn't running fire, then this one is just a direct nerf, so you probably don't want to take it. But if you are building for it, which you presumably are, it is very good then. You lose out on your total damage, but this lets you do way more damage to burning enemies. You pretty much go from 50 damage on regular enemies that aren't burning to doing, I think, 200 damage a shot for things that are burning. which is a lot. That's pretty scary. And if you can light things on fire, like if you're running the Burning Hell overclock for the minigun, or if you're running the incendiary grenade, which assumably you probably are with this, and if you have somebody with a flamethrower or phosphorus shells with a buckshot, or phosphorus buckshot shells, I should say, and Scout's double barrel, it's very likely that you're going to have something on fire that you can really damage with the volatile bullets. They're great for killing big things. Volatile bullets, I don't know where to put them in all honesty, because if you're running like Burning Hell, then they're A tier with Burning Hell. It's a very solid combo. If you're just running them with the incendiary grenades, they're probably C or B tier because you don't get very many of them. You're likely only using it against big things, but it does hit pretty hard against big things. And if you don't have any fire, then they're D tier. So I think I'm going to put them into B tier right now. Then up next we have 6-shooter, which 6-shooter gives you 6 more bullets in total ammo. It makes it so you actually hold 6 shots in your revolver rather than 4. Your fire rate is also doubled, which is good. Your reload time is a bit slower with this, and your base spread is a bit more with this. That's not a huge deal, though. You can shoot this very fast, and if you shoot it at close range into an enemy, not a huge deal. If you take, even with the base spread, it honestly doesn't have that much spread. The revolver's still pretty accurate, even when taking 6-shooter. The only thing that kind of sucks is the reload, but you can take the tier 1 to have a faster reload and negate this. So all around, really good. I like this one. I'd put it up into A tier. I think it's a solid all around overclock. All right, now we move on to the crazy ones for the revolver. First up is elephant rounds. Elephant rounds gives you double damage. So you do 120 damage a shot from 60. You lose half your total ammo though. So you no longer have 24 rounds, you have 12. You also lose 1 bullet in the revolver itself. So you're no longer holding 4, you're holding 3. Your reload time is slower, just as slow as it is with 6-shooter. Your base spread is cut in half, so your gun's even more accurate, but your spread per shot, and this is pretty noticeable, as well as the recoil, is increased by a lot. So when you fire it, you definitely know that you fired it. But when you hit something, you definitely know that you hit something with elephant rounds. You can build this all damage if you want, and completely wreck things like Praetorians, Dreadnoughts, just one-shot things like grabbers out of the air if you hit them in the weak spot. It lets you do some really crazy stuff, and it lets you essentially have a little sniper rifle as your secondary. You could go all ammo too, and this thing body shots grunts. It still kills Praetorians and anything at long range very quickly. This one's just really good. This one's a really solid overclock, especially since all of Gunner's primary weapons are very good at killing crowds. So if you want something that's highly specialized for killing single targets, this one is probably the best one. And I'd put it up into S tier because of that. And then our other crazy overclock that we have is magic bullets. And this one is kind of the opposite of elephant rounds. This one cuts your damage down. So you go from 60 damage to 40 damage. You go from having 24 ammo to 32 ammo. So you get more bullets. So anytime that you hit within an enemy within 5 meters of that enemy, your bullet will ricochet into one of those enemies, assuming that there's multiple. If you run this with explosive rounds and you run this with poison rounds, and just run full ammo, because why wouldn't you? This thing clears crowds incredibly fast. This thing kills crowds sometimes faster than your primary weapons do. It's insane. So if you want to take a very high damage primary weapon like jet fuel or exhaust vectoring or Big Bertha, this one makes such a good secondary to pair with them because you just destroy everything then. It's also really good if you're just waiting for Born Ready to come up. You can just spam fire the revolver into crowds, spam fire the revolver at anything. You don't even need to be accurate with this. You just need to get within 5 meters of anything that you're trying to hit. And if you're firing at a crowd, you're definitely going to hit something. You're probably going to hit multiple somethings because of the explosive rounds you could put into it as well. This one, you build it completely different, you play it completely different than the other revolvers, but it's probably the craziest thing that Gunner has, and I'd put it at the very top of S tier. It's also one of the funnest overclocks to play too. Because the game is no longer how accurate can you shoot. Can you hit enemies from a long distance? Doesn't matter. Can you hit close to an enemy? Good enough. Alright, then we're moving on to the Burst Pistol, which has some solid overclocks, but I don't think it has anything as crazy as we've seen, at least with these two with the revolver. First up, we have Full Chamber Seal. This gives us 1 more damage, and it cuts down our reload speed by 0.2 seconds. Both those are good. It doesn't necessarily do anything crazy for the Burst Pistol. I think you hit all the same breakpoints you normally would with the burst pistol with this. I don't think that there's anything else, but there could be an outlier for some odd enemy that this does hit exact breakpoints for. Still, it's better than nothing. I would much rather have this than not have an overclock on the gun, so solid B tier. Then we have composite casings. Composite casings gives us more ammo by 36, and it increases our rate of fire by 1. The increase in rate of fire for the burst pistol is just the amount of time it takes for you to fire all 3 rounds, or all 6 rounds. So, good. I like this too. Extra ammo is always nice, and having your gun shoot a little bit quicker is always nice too. I don't think this one's anything crazy either. I think I'd put this one up into B tier, right alongside the full chamber seal. Solid overclocks all the way around. Then we have experimental rounds. This increases your direct damage by 9, so you go from 21 to 30 damage, and it decreases your maximum ammo by 30, so you go from 120 to 90. It also decreases your magazine by 6. That being said, experimental rounds does make it so you can easily hit breakpoints with the burst pistol so that you can one burst grunts, which is fairly important. The loss in ammo is noticeable. You can build it back up. Even with the same build, you can still build it up. You don't have to, though. You can build all damage, and I think that's the better way to build experimental rounds, but you could still build a sustained build with experimental rounds and do pretty well. Put this one higher up into B tier because I think it's pretty solid all the way around. You do need to build around a little bit, but I like it for the most part. Then we have compact mags. Compact mags gives us way more ammo by 84 rounds. We have a slower rate of fire and we have a longer reload. This one's good if you just want to go full ammo with the burst pistol, especially if you're taking like a primary that cuts down on their ammo, like the jet fuel or the Big Bertha or something. This one's a pretty good option to be taking as a secondary. Gives you everything that you'd pretty much want with the burst pistol, at least if you're going with a sustained build like that. I think it's another B tier perk or another B tier overclock. I think it's fine all the way around. I think a lot of the burst pistols are pretty comparable. They're all pretty decent. None of them have been all that bad. I might move experimental rounds up to A tier, actually. You know, I'll put them above plasma burster rounds. I think experimental rounds belong into A tier because they do hit breakpoints kind of nicely. For unstable overclocks, we have electro minelets. This lowers our damage, lowers our magazine size. This one makes it so when we shoot and we hit the ground, any sort of surface, we set down little electro minelets similar to the cryo minelets or similar to the mine layer mines. We lay them down in the ground, and then any enemy walking across them, it zaps, which is pretty good because we can apply the electric status, which is going to slow them down and deal damage over time to them. This can amp up your damage quite a bit. It's not bad to have a lot of the time. I like the electro minelets. I think that they're pretty good. They're fairly comparable to cryo minelets. I think I like the cryo minelets a bit better than these ones. You can also take blow-through rounds with this, the same way you can take cryo minelets, and you can punch through enemies and then leave the minelets on the ground, which will then shock them afterward. That's a pretty good little option that you got there. I think I'd put this one up into A tier. I think previously I said this one wasn't that great, but once you add in blow-through rounds and once you account for how slow everything is, especially if you pair this with like neurotoxin payload where you're just slowing everything down to just a stupid amount, you just completely destroy crowds no matter what difficulty you're playing on. Up next we got micro flechettes. Micro flechettes are kind of interesting. They lower your damage by 11, so you go to 10 damage, but you double your ammo. You also over double your magazine size, so you get more shots. You lower the base spread, and you lower the recoil by half, so your gun is more accurate. The main thing that you're trading off here is the extra damage. You can build this a couple different ways, to where I usually just build it with damage and the longer burst fire, as well as faster burst fire, so that way you can fire all 6 rounds, and I think at that point you can actually reasonably kill grunts. I don't know if you need a headshot with them. I think you can do it with the 6 body shots. At least if you take armor breaking, I think you can. Or you could hit them in the head. I think you can build this to where you can still kill them with one burst, but you'd have to hit all 3 into the head of a grunt, which is asking a little bit much, especially for a pistol that you just want a whole bunch of ammo for. It's more restrictive than some of your other overclocks. I don't think it's as useful as potentially the experimental rounds or the micro flechettes. It's still a really fun overclock to use, and I like using it quite a bit. But I think I'm going to put this one into B tier. I feel like it's decent, but it's not as good as some of the other burst pistol overclocks are. And then our final overclock for gunner and for the burst pistol is the lead spray. This increases your damage by a lot. This increases your damage by 10.5 damage. But it also increases your spread by 300%. So your gun is way less accurate, but you do tons more damage. And if you get close to something when using lead spray, you can spray them down super quick. You can kill things like Praetorians, Dreadnoughts, Oppressors, anything that has a lot of health. You can kill them very fast at close range. You can also, I think, one burst things like Mactera Trijaws if you get kind of lucky, assuming you hit, all 3 rounds. Lead spray, really solid. It is definitely a trade-off. I'm going to put it up into A tier. You could argue that it's better or worse than experimental rounds, because experimental rounds does come at the cost of overall ammo and mag size, and you don't get as much damage with it, but you're more likely to hit enemies with experimental rounds, and you can still hit breakpoints with it. So, pros and cons to each. This is where I'd put all of the gunner overclocks. As you can see, there's a lot of really good ones. There's only a couple here, and even these ones aren't that bad. Like, chain hit's still pretty decent. Bullet hell can be really good, and it's certainly fun to use. The only one I really don't like is this one. This one's just not that great, I found. Next time, we're going to be looking at all of the classes overclocks. We're going to be ranking them all on here. Then we're going to be ranking them again in terms of how fun they are to use, because that's a huge part of actually playing the game, is how much fun are these to actually use. So thanks everybody for watching this. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Special thanks to my supporters over here. These are my members over here on YouTube, and my patrons over on Patreon. They get early access to videos like this. If you'd like to be a part of that, check out the links in the description. I hope you guys have a great day. Remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.